Hey everybody, this is Purgle1 with LV1 Gaming, bringing you a review for Blades of Fire, reviewed on the Xbox Series X, and thanks for the publisher for the review code. Please God, let this be the next evolution of Soulslikes. And to start this, when was the last time you went into a game completely blind? Nowadays, that's pretty rare, for me at least. When I was handed the review code for Blades of Fire, I had never heard of it, so I went into this game with zero expectations. And honestly, I was mostly delightfully surprised. To go ahead and get this out of the way, Blades of Fire doesn't do itself any favors at first glance. The color palette, the graphics, and the overall look just feels a tad bland or uninspired, at least. The game performs well though, but at times it can look like an early Xbox One PS4 title, so all the enjoyment here is found in the gameplay, and it is a shame because a lot of people are just going to probably push this off once they see how the game looks. So sure, Blades of Fire has the usual Souls elements, and bonfire-style checkpoints that respawn enemies, but it takes the formula much further than that. It's genuinely impressive how much Blades of Fire innovates within mostly a AA scope, so the game splits between two different elements: fighting enemies and forging your weapons. That's right, you can no longer blame your sword for your losses, now your sword can blame you. And there's an impressive number of these weapons and a staggering range of options when forging them. Do you want a ridiculously long spear that can poke enemies from a distance but eats up your stamina? Go for it. Do you prefer a tiny baby spear that barely touched your stamina bar? That's an option too. Customizing your weapons, wood, materials, metal, handle, everything affects stats like durability, attack, penetration, and how heavy the weapon is, how fast it attacks, everything. And the forging process itself is relatively simple. Hammer out columns to match the curvature of the weapon you're crafting. Your performance determines a star rating, which impacts how many times the weapon can be repaired before it's permanently broken. So as you level up and get better weapons, you can have max higher repair stars, so to speak. Thankfully, once you hit max stars with a specific design, you can auto-forge it, which means you can skip the minigame and just give the weapon full max stars immediately. You can also, in a great touch, name your weapons. So obviously I ran with weapons named nonsense like Stabby Boy and Short Stabby Boy or Long Stabby Boy. Blades of Fire is great because it puts 50% of your success squarely in your hands, and most of the time that works. Each enemy in Blades of Fire is weak to certain weapon types, like a heavily armored knight, for example, might shrug off some short sword attacks, and the game does a great job of forcing you to rotate through different weapons, so you can't just stick with, a hammer or spear or a sword the entire game. Because you'll find enemies that, when you go up to them attack, some will glow red, meaning if your attacks are going to hurt them, yellow means it's moderately effective, and green means it's going to affect them. So you might fight like a knight, for example, that with a spear, he's only weak to being hit in the limbs or the head because his chest area is way too heavy armored and the spear won't penetrate through it. I found myself constantly naturally switching between these playstyles and never sticking to just one, because within each weapon, we'll use a spear, for example. There's a typical stabbing motion, or there's like you spin it around your head and use it for a massive group of enemies. And so even with just one weapon, there's multiple ways to use it, so you might switch between 2 or 3 different fighting styles just between a single battle. It really helps keep the gameplay fresh, and just as you're getting comfortable with a particular enemy, the game throws another one at you. So instead of leveling up, and this is where it strays a little bit from typical Souls-like formula, is you don't level up in this game. You collect weapon parts to craft better gear. It's an interesting mechanic that reinforces the idea that your skill is what actually progresses and not a number on a stat screen, so to speak. As you advance, you unlock new designs and components, which increases your weapon's effectiveness, and everything here really ties into progression really well. So defeating enemies earns materials and gives you masteries towards those weapons and mastery towards those enemies, which helps you craft stronger weapons. Eating those stronger weapons helps you get better masteries, and it just feels like you're constantly progressing in something, and that's a great feeling. It really does a masterful job of making you progress through the game. And once you master a weapon, you can forge a much higher version tier of it, especially as you unlock them. And interesting to note here too, because the weapons are the focus, that when you die, you don't lose XP. You lose the weapon that you were holding. The sometimes downside of this is that if I was in an area for a ton of time, I didn't really find grinding like the way you would in a Souls game to be that effective, because you're not leveling up. So if you have a really good weapon, you're not really going to want to waste that weapon on a bunch of lower tier enemies just to get through the next spot. And that's probably the only downside to this, is that I found myself sprinting past weaker enemies at certain parts just because I didn't want to waste my best weapon's durability on these trash mobs. So that leads us into the story. The story in Blades of Fire is, it's something. You play as Aaron, spelled Aran, and he might as well just be named Bubba Beefcake. Your goal is to kill the queen, and you're joined by a little companion, a kid, who offers objective hints and helps with, offering your kind of like bestiary for the enemies that you fight and how weak they are to certain weapons. And the quest here, the story, is delivered in such a hilariously matter-of-fact but bizarre way that I genuinely couldn't tell if the writing was intentionally bizarre or not, but I laughed a lot. Between the awkward line deliveries, weird objectives, and just absolutely wild cutscenes, it was really hard for me not to be entertained anytime a cutscene came on the screen. For example, at one point you're searching for a master forger. When you find her, it's this old woman, and you end up tussling with her like in a Shrek movie, but then she hops into her swamp house to leave, but her swamp house is on a giant bug that then sprouts wings and then flies away. It's goofy, absurd, and kind of great. And the main plot here is just you need to kill the queen. And the kid at one point when you first meet him as Aaron goes like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he's like, "I need to kill the queen." And then the game just starts. It is there's nothing to write home about, but its weird charm absolutely won me over. And if the game was emotionally written with a goofy tone, I guess mission accomplished. So for the first 5 or 6 hours, I was really loving Blades of Fire. I mean, like, it had all the makings of a surprise hit. Progression felt rewarding, enemies kept things interesting, the weapon crafting system felt really meaty, and new weapons were fun to try. I was ready to write something like, this niche AA game surpassed all my expectations and might be one of the most enjoyable titles I've played this year. And then I hit a wall. The game's biggest weakness is navigation. There is a map, but it's barely helpful. And yes, I've played Dark Souls, I beat Elden Ring, I play all the Soulslikes, and yes, I'm aware there's not like a crazy helpful map, but this is a little different. So, the map isn't helpful, and there's even an option in a menu to highlight your next objective with a waypoint, a direct waypoint. But it doesn't actually give a waypoint how to get there, it just shows the spot on the map where it is. I spent so much time running in circles trying to figure out where to go next. It was so frustrating. And just when you finally made progress, you get to another area and have to repeat the same thing again, and I would get lost again. I am not being hyperbolic when I say I spent nearly 2 hours in one area, the same area, desperately searching for the way forward. This was even after turning on the thing to show me where the objective was. I started timing it at some points because it took me so long. It was rough, and sadly this happened more than one occasion, and it really just became a part of the experience, sadly. And it really pains me to say that because I had such a great time in this game when I wasn't running in circles. And, for a while I was like, maybe I'm just being an idiot, and then it kept happening, so I really think this is a part of the level design, unfortunately. Now, if the devs could patch in a waypoint system, something like a Dead Space system showing exactly where to go, it would massively improve the experience, or at least somehow show you hints about where you're supposed to go. This would be a non-issue if this was in the game, and I would rate the game much, much higher. On a related note for that, the game just kind of keeps going. Normally I don't really complain about lots of content in a game, but here it started to feel like a chore. Mainly in certain areas. You could really tell certain areas had more, in my opinion, were more interesting and exciting to explore and run and fight between than other areas. The pacing began to lag at some points, and I could really feel my attention slipping, and yet this game just grew on me. I don't know if it was a possible, or possibly unintentional comedy, the weirdly bizarre world, Bubba Beefcake himself, or just genuinely the enjoyable combat and crafting loot, but I mostly had a good time. The frustrating navigation here holds me back from giving it a glowing recommendation, but there is real heart here, and the unique crafting and combat system really elevates Blades of Fire. And if the devs can patch the map system, this could go from a niche gem to, well, I guess a solid niche AA game with a pretty good cult following, because this game came out of nowhere for me and I had a great time. That'll wrap things up for now. Again, I'm Pergo1 with LV1 Gaming. Thanks so much for watching, and like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. We'll see you next time. Bye.